The Fed chairman just called out Donald Trump, and Trump is still too much of a fool to notice. Big surprise there. Welcome back to Occupy Democrats. I'm David Reddish. Tariffs. The word seems to be Trump's favorite, other than maybe Russia. Trump has spent the past 2 months talking about how tariffs will increase wealth in America, and of course, like everything Trump attempts, it's been a disaster. First, there's the trade war he sparked with the United States' two biggest trading partners, Mexico and Canada. Trump slapped them both with 25% tariffs on goods, and both nations issued harsh rebukes, including retaliatory tariffs. This constant slapping of taxes passed on to consumers has sent market analysts hurling towards open windows and sent the stock market into a tailspin. Canada has even threatened to cut off electricity to the United States. For the record, the U.S. imports large amounts of power from our northern neighbor. If the embargo doesn't cause blackouts everywhere from the East Coast to Texas and as far south as Florida, the cost of energy is certain to skyrocket. And still, Trump continues to defend his tariffs. Did you catch this?
Absolutely.
The European Union has treated us so terribly.
You promised Americans to try to reduce costs, and so many of the products that would be tariffed when they come into the country, the outgoing country is not paying the tariff. The buyers in the United States pay that, and then that's passed on to consumers in most instances.
Sometimes.
How would you expect to have prices come down if you have such a broad plan for tariffs? And what do you say to the voters who want to see you reduce everyday costs?
Well, let me just tell you that I got elected for a lot of reasons. Number one was the border. Number two was inflation, because I had almost no inflation. And yet I charged hundreds of billions of dollars of tariffs to countries. And think of it, I had almost no inflation and took in $600 billion of money from other countries. And tariffs don't cause inflation, they cause success. They cause big success. So we're going to have great success. There could be some temporary short-term disruption, and people will understand that. I had that when I negotiated some of the good deals for the farmers. And unfortunately, those deals have been led astray by Biden and his people because they didn't enforce the deals.
Au contraire there, Donald. Economists don't agree with your delusional appraisal of the situation, and neither do the markets. Maybe that's why Trump's tariffs that were set to go into effect in February were postponed at the last minute until March. And then, as March arrived, Trump backed down yet again, postponing them until April. Still, that hasn't stopped the market from dropping close to 4,000 points since Trump took office and started brandishing these commerce killers. And that says nothing about how our closest allies, like Canada and Mexico, have lost faith in the United States. And that's a really big hole we're going to have to dig ourselves out of. And it's only been 2 months. Naturally, with the markets going nuts and the ever-present anxiety over tariffs, and how those will affect the market and inflation, which also affects the market, economists have waited with bated breath for remarks from Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell earlier today. Powell has the ability to alter interest rates, and so there was hope that he might do something to counter Trump's tariff to stupidity, like condemning them altogether. So what happened? Well, check this out.
How much of the higher inflation forecast for this year is due to tariffs? And since the policy path remains the same, are you effectively reading this as a one-time price level shock?
Okay, so how much of it is tariff? So let me say that it is going to be very difficult to have a precise assessment of how much of inflation is coming from tariffs and from other, and that's already the case. You may have seen that goods inflation moved up pretty significantly in the first 2 months of the year. Trying to track that back to actual tariff increases, given what was tariffed and what was not, very, very challenging. So some of it, the answer is clearly some of it. A good part of it is coming from tariffs, but we'll be working, and so will other forecasters, to try to find the best possible way to separate non-tariff inflation from tariff inflation. You know, there's always an unconditional possibility of a recession. It might be broadly in the range of 1 in 4 at any time. If you look back through the years, it could be within 12 months, a 1 in 4 chance of a recession. So the question is whether this current situation, those possibilities are elevated. I will say this: We don't make such a forecast. If you look at outside forecasts, forecasters have generally raised, a number of them have raised their possibility of a recession somewhat, but still at relatively moderate levels, still in the region of the traditional, because they were extremely low. If you go back 2 months, people were saying that the likelihood of a recession was extremely low. So has moved up, but it's not high.
Yes, you heard that correctly. Though we wish he would have been a bit more pointed in his criticism, Powell did call out tariffs as a major force behind rising inflation. He also raised the specter of recession. So is America great again yet? The market did inch up a bit during his speech, but came nowhere close to regaining all the value it lost since Trump announced the tariffs back in January. It's also highly unusual that a Fed chairman would so directly attribute financial woes to a single presidential policy. Trump must be so proud, right? You might wonder, where did Trump even get this idea that tariffs would somehow help American companies? This isn't getting much discussion in the media. Well, I'm not sure who turned him on to it, but if you pay close attention to the posture he's taken in this second term, it looks an awful lot like William McKinley. Remembered his name from junior year American Studies in high school? He was 25th President of the United States, serving from 1897 until he was assassinated in 1901. And he just loved high tariffs. His presidency did coincide with rapid economic growth, but that had more to do with other factors like the Industrial Revolution. McKinley also oversaw the building of the Panama Canal. Is this sounding familiar yet? Trump is making a major miscalculation here, and virtually all the financial analysts agree. The world now has a globalized economy and trades more in technology than goods. The United States and other major nations import huge amounts of goods from elsewhere because we need to, either because they can't be made here cost effectively or because they can't be made at all. Demand is greater than domestic supply. So again, Trump's tariffs are an awful idea designed to make the cost of goods skyrocket, create scarcity, all of which will only make the rich even wealthier. And Fed Chairman Powell is sounding the alarm. Here's hoping someone in Washington hears it and does whatever he has to do to block Trump from inflicting even more pain on the American people. This is Occupy Democrats.